I really got my start writing for money. It was after my freshman year at college. I had been put in charge of the youth drama group at church, and I was writing sketches for them weekly and everything, and ultimately that grew to, I was writing 3 and 4 a week, and started networking with other youth pastors, and putting out a catalog and writing things for other people as they needed it. And I did that for, like I said, all told, I did it for 24 years before I handed that over to somebody else. But I branched out from that into writing for film and producing short films and things like that. I actually had a independent feature produced. I started writing fiction and publishing fiction when that became available through CreateSpace, and I really wanted to be, I wanted to be George Lucas. I wanted to be Joss Whedon and write science fiction because that's what I grew up on and what I love. But, I'd always been a wrestling fan, and it's kind of funny because I was one of those, I was into it, wasn't, I was into it, wasn't. And as an adult, 2001, I got my first WWE pay-per-view, No Way Out, and it just stuck. And then a couple years ago, a friend of mine, or a couple years after that, a friend of mine moved in with me, brought his entire wrestling library, talking videos and also talking books. And that was when I read Have a Nice Day. That was when I read Bobby Heenan's book and Kurt Angle's book and a number of others. So I guess kind of the seed was kind of planted back then, but I was married, and I had actually just left a part-time position as a drama director at a local school. An after-school thing, and I wanted to get into full-time teaching. It wasn't panning out. It's one of those businesses you definitely have to know somebody to get into. Unfortunately, with teaching, that's a whole other subject. So one day I'm at lunch with my wife, and I've had this idea sitting in the back of my head for a while about writing a book about wrestling in Louisville. I'd read some of Mark James's books about Memphis, and like I said, I'd read a number of the autobiographies, and there's a built-in market for books about wrestling, and also people from Louisville love the city of Louisville. There's a great passion for it. And so one day I'm at lunch with her, and this was November 2012 at Penn Station, and I said, I'm thinking about writing a book about wrestling in Louisville. And she said, well, go for it. I said, really? She's not a fan. She's like, you know what? You love this crap. You're a great writer. You're a great storyteller. Why don't you give it a shot? And from that lunch conversation, I'm here today, and with 10 or 11 books, and I've got 2 more on the way later on this year and early next year.
How did you transition to actually writing books for famous professional wrestlers?
The first opportunity I had to do that it was out of a relationship that I developed when I was working with Bluegrass Brawlers, and that was with Kenny Starmaker Bolin. A lot of fans may know was Jim Cornette's best friend growing up, and when Ohio Valley Wrestling was the developmental territory for WWE, he launched, 40 or 50 people, from OVW into WWE, including several that Cornette said, you'll never get these guys called up, and he did. And Bolin's he's a good guy, and he's a great storyteller, and 60 to 70% of it is true, and the rest of it's kind of fudged a little bit. But it's pro wrestling, and I'm drawn to great storytellers. I'm drawn to untold stories, and I told Kenny one day, I said, we should do a book. And he was completely in with that because he's like, you know what, I can make money off of this. So that was my first opportunity, and then sometime probably around the same time, I came in touch with KK Hersbrun, who's the daughter of Lord Leslie Carlton, and suggested to her we do a story about her father as well. So that was my first historical biography. In addition to writing about wrestling history, there's a local independent group called the Bomb Shelter, and their wrestling gimmick is they're time travelers. And they came to me and they said, would you be interested in writing a sci-fi? And I said, yeah. It's like, we want to do this. I'm like, I'm totally in, whatever you want to do. So we put together one short young adult book, The Bomb Shelter, A Scattered Timeline. And I'm working on a sequel to that. And the fun thing about that is we're kind of mixing fiction with the independent wrestling scene. And there's about a dozen wrestlers or so that make cameos in the first book. The second book, the working title is Curse of the Undead Bride, and the main villain in that one is Su Yung. I was contacted by Dr. Bob Bryla, who used to be on the board of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame when it was up in New York. And he had asked me, hey, would you be interested in writing a book about Dr. D. David Schultz? And I quickly responded, well, of course, I'd be interested in working with him. Everybody knows from the John Stossel incident, but it wasn't until I actually got to talk to him a little bit and realized that there was more than just a wrestling story to tell. But I mean, he had 20 plus years as a professional bounty hunter, which ended up taking up half the book. And it was just between the two of them, it was like, why wouldn't I want to write that one? So two of us kind of exchanged emails for a couple of months. We finally got to sit down and meet in Jackson, Tennessee, and kind of discuss, and heard a lot of stories from him in the couple hours we spent. And neat thing about Dr. D is, the stories that he told me that afternoon, when he told them to me later, it was exactly, word for word. His recall for stories, and some of the documents and some of the interviews that he had given previously that he gave to me, when we were working on the book and stuff, that were from 20, 30 years prior. It's the same story. Dr. D's a straight shooter, and he's a guy who tells it like it is and has a lot of opinions that, granted, a lot of people don't like his opinions, but, he was a lot of fun to work with. I think most people have read the book would say, the wrestling stuff was great, but I had no idea about all this other stuff. And the stories about him going into Hell's Kitchen in the middle of the night and coming up the fire escape and having somebody watching the back door, and it was that was the most fun part of that story.
What was the single most interesting thing you learned about Madman Pondo?
You have to read the book for that one, because that's his story.
Bait the people into that one.
I will tell you, Pondo is a guy, he's a deathmatch guy. Deep down, he's got a heart of gold. He has helped to launch, so many people and to take people under his wing and all that kind of stuff. He was a kid from Flora, Illinois, who loved wrestling, who got to live his dream being a professional wrestler. And it's just another, I like great storytellers. I like people that have great stories to tell. And, the thing about Pondo, after I met him, anytime I'd see him, he'd be like, hey, come here, I want to tell you another one, and then things he'd post on Facebook and stuff. And the best thing about a Pondo story is, just when you're at the point with a Madman Pondo story that you think this can't possibly be true, he pulls his phone out and goes, here's a picture. That's the fun thing about Pondo is, he's a nut. He's done crazy things, and he's got the pictures to prove it.
Is there a chapter dedicated to the Insane Clown Posse and Juggalo Championship Wrestling?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The one I just released is Black Panther Jim Mitchell, which I've been working on for 3 years. He was the first African-American superstar in pro wrestling, first real main event star. And it was a story that I came across when I did my first book about Louisville wrestling. And he was just a fascinating character, and somebody I wanted to know more about, and managed to luck into meeting someone who had bought his house, from the bank after his stepdaughter passed away, and he had saved all of this memorabilia of his, and letters and documents and photos, and I've got over 900 things scanned on my computer at home from his life, and I was finally able to really flesh out and tell his story. But right now I'm finishing up with Hurricane J.J. McGuire, who was Jimmy Hart's writing partner. They wrote Shawn Michaels' theme, they wrote Honky Tonk Man's theme, and over 100 different wrestlers' theme songs for WWF and WCW. And I'm also working with Tracy Smothers on his book, which I'm real excited about. And another guy who's just done a whole lot of stuff. As he likes to say, he's been fired from every company there is to work for, and has done a whole lot to help out a lot of people over the years. And just another really great storyteller. You can find my books on Amazon.com, and you can also find more on EatSleepWrestle.com. I'm definitely looking to, down the road, do something about Wee Willie Davis and Elvira Snodgrass, and people can find out about the Hurricane McGuire and also the Tracy Smothers Project. I believe in remembering the past and celebrating the past, and I have a great affinity for the old-time wrestlers and the old-time stories, but I'm also a fan of current wrestling and current people who are working their way up. When I first went out and started selling my book at independent wrestling shows, I found pro wrestlers, these guys and ladies who are out there and driving 4 hours to work a show because this is their dream. I found them inspiring, and me as a writer, I draw inspiration from them every time I'm around them, and I hope people can pick up on that as well as learn a little about the history of this business, which is just amazing.